You walk into an old building. Nobody has told you anything about it. But before you've noticed a single detail, your body already knows something is wrong. Your skin tightens. Your breathing changes. Some part of you is scanning the room for a threat you can't name. Most people call this a haunted feeling. They assume it means something supernatural is detecting them, a presence, a watcher, something old, aware, and waiting in the dark. But researchers who have spent decades investigating locations like this keep finding something stranger than a haunting. The building may not need a ghost at all. Something real is moving through that room, hijacking your nervous system before your mind has even had the chance to name it. In the 1980s, an engineer named Tandy was working late in a lab that had a reputation for being haunted. He felt an oppressive weight settle over the room, cold sweat, the sense that someone was standing just behind him. Then, in the corner of his eye, a gray shifting shape. He turned to face it. Nothing was there. The next day, Tandy was polishing a fencing blade clamped in a vise, and the blade started to vibrate on its own. No one had touched it. That single detail sent him looking for an invisible cause, and he found one. Infrasound, a sound wave below the range of human hearing, pulsing through the lab at almost exactly 19 hertz. Its source was a newly installed extractor fan. Tandy and a colleague later proposed that at that specific frequency, the human eyeball itself can start to resonate, distorting what you see at the edge of your vision, just enough to manufacture a shape that isn't there. He went on to detect the same frequency in a centuries-old cellar in Coventry, where visitors had reported the exact same sensations for years. Other researchers have since challenged this theory, arguing there's no solid comparative data showing that infrasound is more common in allegedly haunted locations than in ordinary rooms. But the physical effect on the body at that frequency, the unease, the shivering, is well documented on its own. Sound isn't the only invisible force capable of doing this. In a lab in Ontario, a neuroscientist named Michael Persinger spent years testing what happens when you expose the brain to a very specific, very weak, shifting magnetic field aimed at the temporal lobes. In his experiments, a striking number of participants reported the same thing, a sensed presence in the room with them, someone standing just out of view. For many, it felt unmistakably real. Persinger's explanation was that the brain's two hemispheres, when destabilized by the field, briefly misread each other. One side generates the sensation of a presence, and the other side, the half that constructs your sense of self, interprets that signal as something external, something else in the room. It's a compelling idea. It's also one of the most disputed in the field. Independent labs failed to reproduce the effect, and some scientists argue the fields were simply too weak to influence the brain at all. What's left is a genuine open question. Are certain rooms quietly generating something in your head, or is something else entirely responsible? That something else turned out to be the room itself. In 2000 and 2001, psychologist Richard Wiseman ran two of the largest live experiments ever conducted inside supposedly haunted sites, Hampton Court Palace in England and the underground vaults beneath Edinburgh. Over 1,000 people walked through these spaces and marked down exactly where they felt something unusual. Two things happened at once. People who already believed in ghosts and people who'd been told a room was active reported far more strange sensations, proving expectation alone can manufacture an experience. But the far stranger result came from visitors who knew nothing about the location's history at all. They still reported unease, clustering in the exact same rooms, again and again. Something about those specific spaces, independent of belief, independent of story, was doing the work. Wiseman's team went looking for what that something actually was, and in the haunted gallery at Hampton Court, they found it hiding in the walls. The gallery is lined with old concealed doors, the kind built centuries before anyone worried about draft proofing. Air was leaking through them constantly, and in two exact spots, the temperature dropped by as much as 2 degrees Celsius. Visitors weren't imagining the chill. They were walking through an actual column of cold air, in the same corridor where people had reported a ghostly nun for hundreds of years. For generations, this physical effect had been mistaken for something supernatural. That's the pattern hiding underneath almost every haunted house cliché. Ceiling height, lighting levels, the uneven flow of air through old stonework. The size and shape of a room can quietly manipulate your nervous system before a single thought about ghosts ever enters your head. And sometimes the building isn't influencing you, it's actively poisoning you. In 1921, a doctor named Wilmer published the case of a family living in an old house. Within weeks, they were experiencing what sounds like a full haunting. Footsteps overhead in empty rooms, a shifting gray figure in the hallway. The father, certain he was being watched every time he sat alone in the kitchen. The children grew pale, listless, sick. It was a family member who finally suggested the real culprit. Their furnace was broken, and it had been leaking carbon monoxide into the house for weeks. Carbon monoxide poisoning can produce headaches, hallucinations, a crushing sense of dread, and the specific sensation of a presence nearby. Once the furnace was repaired, the haunting stopped completely. Historians researching this case found it wasn't unique. In the Victorian era, when homes ran on gas lighting and coal furnaces with none of today's safety standards, low-grade carbon monoxide exposure was common, quiet, and almost never suspected. Some researchers now argue it may have fueled an entire generation's worth of ghost stories. None of this means every uneasy feeling in an old building has a hidden mechanical explanation waiting to be found. Some experiences remain genuinely unexplained. But look at what we already know. A sound wave you cannot hear, a magnetic field you cannot feel, a room shaped in ways that quietly influence your perception, a gas you cannot smell. 4 completely different forces, all capable of creating the same experience your brain files under ghost. That's the part that should actually unsettle you. Not whether these places are haunted. It's that your own senses can give you the story of a ghost before they ever reveal what's actually affecting you. Sometimes the room itself changes what your body feels. Sometimes your brain changes the meaning of those sensations. And sometimes the most powerful force in the room is the story you already believe. For centuries, humans have been turning unfamiliar sensations into stories, giving names to things they could feel but couldn't understand. The next time a room gives you goosebumps, it's probably not just your imagination. Something in that space really is affecting your body, but your brain still has to decide what that feeling means. Maybe the question was never whether these places were haunted, but how much of the haunting came from something far closer than a ghost. So what about you? Have you ever stood in a room and felt something that science couldn't fully explain?